It's been a little more than a day since Charlie Kirk's assassination in Utah. He was gunned down, and as of this recording, the suspect has been taken into custody. We are learning in real time what is the ideology of this alleged shooter. And of course, we are about to be hit with a lot of news cycle, speculation about what this means for our country, what this means for the future, and our hopes and fears. Sagar and Genti of Breaking Point's program described this moment as a Rubicon moment in the history of the United States, a point of no return. I've been thinking about that, and I've been pretty silent for the last couple days, at least in public, on this event that I don't think anybody can doubt is a momentous event. The most I have done recently, at least publicly, was got into a small debate about the inevitable blame focus that we are currently experiencing. And my take on it is what this video is about. At the same time, I'm planning to be a little more reserved in what I say and carefully choose what I say. But I need to share one thing with those of you who know that I am a fierce critic of Turning Point USA and a fierce critic of what I feel are the authoritarian tendencies of white Christian nationalism and the current administration. That being said, I describe this moment as not a Rubicon, not a point of no return. I don't believe in such things. I don't believe in determinism. I don't believe that things cannot change. If there's one thing that we can verify unequivocally and empirically about history, is that change is not only inevitable, it's the only thing we can determine outside of complete annihilation. And as a theologian, I can suggest that even complete annihilation may not be the be-all, end-all. I do have one theological point to make, if I can get to it by the end of this video on my commute. And that is something I will reserve for the end, but I will hint at it now, and that is perhaps this person who was assassinated, number one, was a human being and shares our common humanity despite his ideological preferences. And that in itself alone bears witness to my theological perspective in something called apokatastasis, the reconciliation of all things. That's my view as a Christian And it's a view that is actually at odds with the theology espoused by Charlie Kirk in his living words. The caveat that I'm hinting at here, for those of you who know a little bit about apokatastasis, which is an ancient Christian belief in the restoration of all things, and all meaning all here, is that it's quite possible, if there is life after death, consciousness after death, which I believe there is, that the soul that has departed now has full understanding of these earthly matters that are complicated and we take hard stances on, opinions on, political formations on. And my hope and belief is that this soul is alive and well and now understands these things and most likely disagrees with all of their earthly sentiments and even theological convictions. That was a mouthful, but for those of you who can ponder those words and understand theology, you can unpack that, think about that, and let me know what you think. This is Avi Penhollow. You're watching the Proximity Portal, and what I just said actually was the end of this video. Let me back up now and lead with what I was planning to, and that is this. Shortly before 9/11, up in the middle of the night with a sense of dread and not sure why. I don't consider myself to be a prophet, but there is something that has happened in my life several times similar to this, where a premonition or a feeling has come over me and this happened. I usually kind of forget about it as I go about my day. But on 9/11, as I was driving to work and listening to a radio programming describing this terrible situation about two planes flying into the Twin Towers in New York City, at first I thought that the commentator was simply describing a possible event, a possible terror, a hypothetical situation. As I got closer to work that day, it became clear that this was not a hypothetical situation, but in fact, a terrorist attack was taking place in New York City. And I want to tell you about the first feeling that I had, because it's related to the first feeling I had when I learned about the murder and assassination of Charlie Kirk. The first feeling that I had when it became real to me that the 9/11 event was real, or had happened, was dread, but not dread in the sense of an anger that I know a lot of people felt, and we wanted to go. That's actually what it was. It was a feeling of dread that America, or our collective sentiment, was going to be one of blind anger and war. The specific phrase that went through my head as I was walking into work was, now Bush has a blank check to go after whoever he wants. And we all know now that's exactly what happened after 9/11. It was a Rubicon moment in some senses, but it was more of a Rubik's Cube in others. By that I mean, when you go to solve one side, it complicates things on other sides. And in that case, my fear was this terrible, tragic event of 9/11 was going to be used in a blind rage moment, capitalizing on the horrible tragedy to accomplish goals against political and economic enemies. The other night, before this happened, it happened again. I woke up in the middle of the night with a feeling of dread, and I couldn't quite place it because, as far as life is concerned, things have been going pretty well. Not to say that there's not been a lot of challenges, but we're facing those challenges and we've been doing quite well. But I still couldn't shake that feeling. But I had a couple very, very, very busy days ahead of me. And so I couldn't sit around and speculate about it. In fact, my schedule was so compact, I barely had time to eat during just work-related stuff. So I pushed through and continued on with my day. When the news came to me, it was my daughter sent me a text. I'm going to leave out a bit of context that's actually really important, but for the sake of confidentiality, I was in the oddest of places when that news came in. And I'll just say this, I was in the presence of someone who I know is a Charlie Kirk fan or supporter, who also knows that I'm not. And so I had to break the news. It's also someone I consider to be a colleague and friend. Both of us felt a sense of dread. I did not have the freedom to unpack that with that person at that moment. Nor I don't even think it would have been a good thing. I don't know. But my immediate sense was, this is not going to end well. This is going to be more significant than I think a lot of people realize. And I'm not talking about the media event and circus that is most likely happening right now. That's the good thing in this for me, is that I don't have time right now to tune in, at least until tomorrow. The only reason I'm talking now is that I have a few minutes on my commute to work, which is actually almost finished now. I am afraid, and I've already seen some evidence of this, that this will be used not as a Rubicon moment, but a Rubik's Cube moment, because I believe that we can change things if we really want to. But I am afraid that this will result, we've already seen evidence of it, and I don't even have to look into the media to know that it's happening, that this will turn into a martyrdom and a glossing over of the very complex disparities in ideological beliefs that were represented by Charlie Kirk and those who opposed his ideas. And an excuse for a regime that has already demonstrated heavy leanings toward authoritarianism, censorship, and dismantling of support systems for those who disagree. Which ironically is the very projection that this same regime places upon because despite my disagreements with many things in the conservative side of things, we certainly can have a civil and rational disagreement. But I don't think that's what we've been dealing with since 2016 and even before that. That's for another time. All I am saying to those who are familiar with me, familiar with our faith tradition, and those who understand that this moment is not a moment that should be celebrated. But I have those on quote unquote my side, because I still have a lot of problems with those who make this about the quote unquote left, because America cannot even define what that really means. They just go on the popular media definitions of it. I see no cause for celebration at all. I felt sick to my stomach. And I felt sick to my stomach on the basis of humanity, the humanity of the situation. These are connected issues, but they're different, because I also feel sickened by responses that inevitably are resulting from this event. So there's the humanity and the sinking feeling of just the awfulness of assassination and murder. And then for me, they're connected but separate issues. The inevitable sickness of response of people. And I may have some people who are angry with me for not celebrating. And that's where we come into the theological aspects of what I was hinting at earlier. I believe in the reconciliation of all things. But I believe that this world that we inhabit currently is a direct contradiction to my theological hopes and aspirations. I do not believe that Jesus Christ supports the ideas of white American Christian nationalism unequivocally. And I disagree when a white Christian nationalist claims that they are either not a white Christian nationalist or that their ideas are congruent with, however you want to describe it, biblical or Christian values. Conversely, those who share my political feelings or leanings or hopes, which are based more on cooperation than competition, and you can attach the labels to that however you want. I find it equally appalling when those who agree with me would find celebration in this. And I say this with complete empathy and, as much as I can, understanding of the hurt, pain, and terror that some of the ideologies of the late Charlie Kirk espoused cause in our communities. I am not blind to that reality at all. So there's a few different ways that you can contemplate this. And I pointed out a couple of them. I don't think this is a Rubicon moment, but it is a very significant moment. I see it far more complex, just like everything in all of our current context is complex. And when we oversimplify it, it becomes a Rubicon moment. Those of you who know that my theological views influence my strategic views ideologically. And I'll leave you with this, that I believe where sin abounds, there does grace much more abound. That's a paraphrase of St. Paul. And let me define these last two things before, and then I have to go. Sin, in this sense and in the linguistic sense from the Greek from which it comes, hamartia, does not mean smoking, drinking, and premarital sex. Sin literally means, many of you know this, to miss the mark in archery. Imperfection. Distorted views. Incomplete views. Those are sinful. So where sin abounds, which I think we all can agree is everywhere, both inside and outside, there doth grace much more abound. But sin abounding, visually and viscerally, or visually, by all appearances, abounding means permeates everything. Everywhere you look. So sin in the way that I just described it. The evils, the complications, the tensions, the contradictions to reconciliation abound. And it's in the spaces between, the nuance, the crevices of all of that abounding distortion is where the truth is found. And that is why I'm asking those of you who claim to be people of faith, let's check ourselves. Let's meditate. Let's reflect. And choose our words carefully. If your faith requires you to take a side right now, in the sense of, do I celebrate or do I want to go after the liberals? You are in sin. That is missing the mark. So be careful in this moment, because although I don't think it's a Rubicon moment, as Sagar and Genti says, I do think it is a Rubik's Cube moment And if you're familiar with that metaphor, it requires careful skill, strategic thinking, and considering many sides, not just solving one side. You solve one side, you complicate matters everywhere else. And that's why these matters are not easy. And ultimately, apokatastasis, the reconciliation of all things, which is my theological bedrock, something I firmly believe in, that all will be reconciled. That is why we have to pause and have a greater understanding in consciousness. And that also is where love with a capital L comes into play. The divine love, because we live in a moment of time, but it feels compressed, and the matters feel differently than if we are to, in meditation, we are able to step out and understand the expansiveness of time and the universe, and take a step back a little bit in moments like this. That is not burying your head in the sand and apathetic. That's actually the most proactive thing you can do when you're trying to solve the cube, rather than looking at things as a point of no return. Let me know what you think. This is Avi Penhall. You're watching The Proximity Portal, and I wish you all well in this moment, and have a great day. Thank you. If I can end this now. There we go.